In October 2014, South Africa erupted with the news of the death of beloved Bafana Bafana and Orlando Pirates footballer Senzo Meyiwa. The story, widely reported by media outlets, was that he was the victim of a botched robbery at the home of his girlfriend, Kelly Khumalo. To put it simply, two men broke into the house where Senzo was, demanding cell phones and money. A scuffle then ensued, and Senzo was fatally shot by one of the intruders. There were 6 people who were with Senzo the night he was murdered. They were Ntombi Khumalo, the owner of the house, Kelly Khumalo, Senzo's girlfriend, Zandi Khumalo, Kelly's sister, Tumelo Madlala and Mthethwa, who were Senzo's friends, and Longwe Twala, who was Zandi's boyfriend at the time. Kelly Khumalo's 2 children were also present. During the home invasion, only one cell phone belonging to one of the 7 occupants was taken. Since the death of Senzo Meyiwa, different theories have emerged from the police investigations, the lawyers involved in the trial, witnesses, and the suspects. In this video, I'm going to explore these different theories. I'll also discuss some key points from the 2022 trial. Hello everyone, and welcome to the South African True Crime Stories channel. On this channel, I discuss true crime stories from South Africa. I'm very new to this space, and if you clicked on this video, thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe to help me get this channel off the ground. The Senzo Meyiwa case is a high-profile one, and all of my research comes from news articles, the ongoing trial, and the Netflix documentary. Therefore, I reserve my right to tell this story using the facts that already exist within the public domain. Remember, true crime is a genre that tells the story of a real crime. I'm not the first person to tell this story, and I won't be the last, but I want to look at this case from different angles while being sensitive to the real lives involved. Before we dive into the events that led to the end of Senzo Meyiwa's life, let's start from his beginning. Senzo and his twin Siyabonga were born to Samuel, who is also known as Sam, and Ntombi Meyiwa from Umlazi, South Africa. Umlazi is a township that's southwest of Durban, South Africa's 3rd largest city. It's the 4th largest township in South Africa. In South Africa, a township is an urban area usually found outside larger towns or cities. Townships were used during apartheid to racially segregate people. Black South Africans who had jobs in the urban areas were prohibited from living in cities and suburbs, that is, where white people lived, and were forced to live in townships. Although desegregation has since taken place, there are over 500 townships in South Africa today. Senzo and Siyabonga enjoyed 6 years together as twins, and their personalities were strikingly different. Where Senzo was more introverted and shy, Siyabonga was more of an extrovert. It's said that Siyabonga could be very protective over Senzo. Unfortunately, tragedy struck the Meyiwa family in 1990 when Senzo and Siyabonga went swimming at the beach. Both of the little boys were defenseless against the mighty tide of Durban's Indian Ocean. They were under the supervision of their father, Sam, who wasn't swimming with them. By the time Samuel was aware of what was happening, the boys were already in trouble. A lifeguard tried to save them from the merciless waters, and when medical personnel arrived, it was too late for little Siyabonga. Senzo was in a critical condition, and the water which he had breathed in caused him to have pulmonary edema. This is a condition caused by too much fluid in the lungs. He was then taken to hospital, where he later recovered. According to Siyabonga's tombstone, his birth date is the 24th of January, 1984. This means that he passed away when he was 6 years old. Now, there is a bit of controversy surrounding Senzo Meyiwa's age, because at the time of his death, he was reported to be 27 years old. This would make his birth year 1987, which contradicts the date on Siyabonga's tombstone. School records also indicate that the twins were born in 1984, which means that Senzo died at age 30, not 27. The implication is that he, Senzo, possibly lied about his age in adult life. His mother also confirmed his actual birth year in a book written about his life by Tumelo Madlala. Is this weird? Yes. But it's not unusual for football players to lie about or conceal their true age. Scouts prefer younger, talented players to sign with their club. The players know that there is a lesser chance of being signed if they are 23 as opposed to being 17 years old. Ayeni Ayodeji, a Nigerian sport expert and football coach, said, "When a player has a poor background, he is desperate to get things done for the betterment of himself and his family. If they're looking for an underage player that needs to be transferred and you know that opportunity can slip away or will slip away from you." As a child, Senzo went through a traumatic experience with nearly drowning and losing his twin brother. In Soweto Mandlanzi's book, Sam and Meyiwa were understandably concerned about how he'd cope after Siyabonga's death. After surviving this tragedy, his parents said Senzo took on the spirit of Siyabonga and became bolder and more outgoing. This must have been a relief for them, in a way, because he was still so young, and it might have been too much for them to see their little boy going through the motions of grief. Around this time, Senzo was attending Kuthala Primary School in Umlazi Township. This is when he discovered football. As he grew up, it became clear that football was his passion. When Senzo was young, living in the township wasn't and still isn't easy, and there were limited opportunities for people to succeed. This is the reason Senzo's parents wanted him to focus on his academics at school. They were like most Black South African parents who believed that education was the key to success and possibly a way out of the township. While the Black middle class in townships has grown, there is still poor infrastructure like limited running water, electricity, and roads. There also isn't enough access to libraries and healthcare, and schools in townships are usually under-resourced and underfunded. When it comes to sports, there is a lack of facilities in the townships. I think that is partly the reason Senzo is celebrated as a township success story. When Senzo was older and started attending KwaMgaga High School, he was approached by Mr. Thompson Poswa, the coach of a local youth club called London Cosmos FC. At the height of his professional career, he may have been a goalkeeper, but Senzo actually started off as a striker. During his time with London Cosmos FC, he played the striker position until a time when his team urgently needed a goalie for a match. With no volunteers, Senzo offered to play the position. Mr. Poswa saw that Senzo was enormously talented, and thus began Senzo's journey as a goalkeeper. Senzo was so skilled that he played for the under-14 and under-17 teams of his club. His parents still weren't happy that his academics weren't at the forefront. At one point, his coach, Mr. Poswa, and the principal of KwaMgaga High School approached his parents to convince him that Senzo had a real chance of making it. One day, Senzo's coach, Mr. Poswa, came across an ad for trials for the Orlando Pirates FC Youth Development Program. The Orlando Pirates Football Club was founded in 1937. At 86 years old, it is one of South Africa's oldest clubs. They were originally based in another township called Orlando, Soweto. The club's nicknames include the Buccaneers, amongst many others, and their team colors are black and white. Orlando Pirates was founded by the children of migrant workers. These migrants had moved from the rural areas to work in the gold mines near the urban areas. Boys would come together at any opportunity to play soccer in open spaces. The original club was formed by teenagers at the Orlando Boys Club. A few years later, they competed at the Johannesburg Bantu Football Association without a kit and barefoot. The club's first president, Bethule Mokgosinyane, bought the first team kit with his own money. Since its creation, Orlando Pirates FC has won 9 league titles and 35 trophies. The current chairman, Irvin Khoza, is credited with the club's growth and popularity over the last few years. Orlando Pirates is undeniably one of South Africa's most recognizable football clubs. For the youth development trials, Mr. Thompson Poswa took a teenage Senzo and a few other boys to Ellis Park Stadium in Gauteng, South Africa. This stadium hosts rugby and football games and is famous for hosting the final of the 1995 Rugby World Cup, which was won by South Africa's national team, the Springboks. Out of hundreds of boys who attended the trials, only 3 were chosen, and Senzo was one of them. This meant that Senzo had to move to Gauteng, and an obstacle was presented as his family was from KwaZulu-Natal, and they were not well off. They couldn't support his move financially. Nevertheless, he left home and continued with his studies at Bupelo High School while training under the Orlando Pirates Youth Development Program. Senzo spent the rest of his teenage years in Gauteng. His journey through the ranks wasn't smooth, and while training with the club, he was often overlooked in favor of other goalkeepers. He certainly had to prove his worth to those who didn't have much confidence in him. He was a substitute player for many seasons. He finally made his Orlando Pirates debut on the 8th of November 2006, where his team won 2-1 against AmaZulu FC. In Soweto Mandlanzi's book, 2012 and 2013 were the best seasons of Senzo's career, as he took the number 1 position at Orlando Pirates. On the 2nd of June 2013, he made his debut for South Africa's national team, Bafana Bafana, in a match against Lesotho, and they won. During his career, Senzo also led as captain for Orlando Pirates and South Africa's Bafana Bafana. A few months before his death, Senzo tasted victory when Orlando Pirates won the 2014 Nedbank Cup. This was a testament to all of the hard work he'd put into training during his youth. His journey to becoming a household name was only beginning. This is a very short summary of Senzo's career as a professional footballer, but the main thing to understand is that he was just about to reach the peak of his career when he was tragically killed. Before I move on to the night Senzo was murdered, I'd like to mention that he married Mandisa Mkhize in a traditional ceremony in 2011. During his relationship or marriage with Mandisa, he became a father for a second time. By the time he passed away, he was a father to 3 daughters. Before explaining the theories surrounding Senzo Meyiwa's death, let's look at what happened that night from the perspective of his friend, Tumelo Madlala. This is part of Tumelo's court testimony. Tumelo Madlala testified that everything happened before 9 p.m. while they were watching a soccer game in Ntombi Khumalo's Vosloorus Township home. More specifically, Ntombi Khumalo's home was in an area of Vosloorus called Mzamo section. Vosloorus is a township that lies 30 kilometers southeast of Johannesburg. In the Mail and Guardian, a South African newspaper, Mzamo was described in an article as a fairly new area, established in the early 1990s. In the same article, a resident named Leslie Ngache spoke about the increasing crime in the area. He said, "But even now it's petty crime. kids stealing car hubcaps, and a few house break-ins. He did say, however, that no one committed murder. This article was published in 2014, a few days after Senzo's murder. Tumelo Madlala said that on Sunday, the 26th of October 2014, Senzo Meyiwa and his girlfriend Kelly Khumalo were visiting the home of her mother, Ntombi Khumalo. They were accompanied by Kelly Khumalo's sister, Zandi Khumalo, and two of Senzo's friends, Mthethwa and Tumelo Madlala. Kelly's two children, who shall not be identified, were also present. They were later joined by Zandi Khumalo's partner at the time, Longwe Twala. The 7 adults and 2 children enjoyed a Sunday meal prepared by Ntombi, Kelly, and Zandi. They sat on the couches in the living room and also watched a soccer game. It was a match between Chelsea and Manchester United. They drank beer as they ate and watched the game. In court, Tumelo recalled that they were to attend a party hosted by Senzo's teammate Roy Mahamudza later that evening. A short while before the crime took place, Tumelo Madlala stepped outside of Ntombi Khumalo's house to smoke. He was on crutches and had a cast on his leg at the time. He was joined by Mthethwa. Whilst chatting, Mthethwa went to the bathroom or began urinating while Tumelo smoked. When Mthethwa finished urinating and Tumelo finished smoking, they decided to return to the house and go inside the house via the kitchen door. But before they went inside, Mthethwa warned Tumelo that it was disrespectful to enter the house smelling of smoke, especially because the house belonged to an elder and she was present. There was a tap outside of the house next to the kitchen door. Tumelo rinsed out his mouth and washed his hands per Mthethwa's instructions to get rid of the smoke smell. As Tumelo and Mthethwa were about to enter the house, Senzo appeared and stood in front of the kitchen door. The 3 friends stood and chatted, and Kelly appeared to ask Tumelo and Mthethwa if they were leaving. Thereafter, they went back to the living room where they continued watching the soccer game. Tumelo said that at a certain point, Senzo and Kelly left to go and buy flu medication for Ntombi, who had been feeling under the weather. By Tumelo's testimony, there was a short window of time between the time that he stepped outside of the house to smoke and the time that the crime took place. When Senzo and Kelly returned, and all of the 7 adults were seated in the living room, Tumelo said a man suddenly entered the house, and by Tumelo's description, he was holding a gun. In court, Tumelo said that the doors or burglar bars weren't properly closed, and perhaps that was how the intruder entered the house. Ntombi Khumalo's home is an open plan house. This means that it has combined common spaces which aren't separated by walls. In this house, one would be able to see the kitchen while seated in the living room, for example. The intruder had locks or dreadlocks and was short with large eyes. He was also wearing a brownish or caramel jacket and a hat with a Scotch pattern, according to Tumelo. According to Tumelo, the man spoke isiZulu to them and demanded cell phones and money. Tensions must have been running high at this point, but Longwe brazenly got up quickly and pushed the intruder. After pushing the intruder, Longwe ran outside of the house. Tumelo said that Longwe's action of pushing the intruder caused the rest of the people in the house to get up. He said that's when Kelly ran to a bedroom to protect herself. Tumelo said that when he got up, he saw a second intruder in the kitchen and that Senzo was holding the right hand of the intruder and pressing him against the kitchen wall. Tumelo said he noticed this because when he got up, his intention was to go out through the kitchen door. When he saw Senzo pressing the second intruder against the wall, He approached and hit the intruder on the left side of his face with his fist. According to Tumelo, at this point the first intruder was being hit by Kelly, Ntombi, and Zandi. Zandi was also hitting him with Tumelo's crutches. During the scuffle, with Senzo fighting the second intruder and the three women fighting the first intruder, a gunshot went off. Tumelo was standing beside Senzo at this point because he hit the intruder with his fist. Tumelo said that he immediately ran to a bedroom and hid his phone among some clothes. He wanted to escape through that bedroom's window, but there were burglar bars. In court, he testified that he didn't know the directions that the other people ran in after the gunshot. At this point, he didn't know that Senzo had been shot. After Senzo was shot, the two intruders ran out of the house. In terms of the police investigation regarding Senzo's murder, there are two case dockets. These are case docket number 375 and case docket number 636. In South Africa, a case docket is opened by police when there is an investigation into a crime. The current trial is based on case docket number 636, where the 5 suspects are named as the perpetrators. Case docket number 375, on the other hand, is based on another police investigation and names the 6 people who were in the house with Senzo as the perpetrators. This is one of the reasons for the different theories surrounding his death. Now, let us explore the first theory of Senzo Meyiwa's murder. On 26 October 2020, South African Police Minister Bheki Cele jubilantly announced the arrest of 5 suspects in the Senzo Meyiwa murder case. The arrests came about after a successful police investigation led by Colonel Bongani Gininda. The announcement came about exactly 6 years to the night that Senzo Meyiwa was murdered. The arrested suspects are Muzi Sibia, accused number 1, Bongani Ntanzi, accused number 2, Carlos Mncube, accused number 3, Nthokoziseni Mapisa, accused number 4, and Sfiso Ntuli, accused number 5. They are currently in police custody and are on trial for the murder of Senzo Meyiwa. The next couple of facts about the accused are from the Netflix documentary called Senzo, Murder of a Soccer Star. The investigation which led to these arrests concluded that Senzo's murder was a contractual killing or a hit. The investigation team strongly believed that his death was a hit because 3 of the accused are professional hitmen and are or were already serving time for hits they had committed. These particular men are Carlos Mncube, who is accused number 3, Nthokoziseni Mapisa, accused number 4, and Sfiso Ntuli, accused number 5. The police still don't know the mastermind behind the contractual killing, but they believe that the plans to murder Senzo took place at a hostel in Vosloorus, not far from the house Senzo was in. In South Africa, a hostel is a housing compound that was developed and designed for Black migrant workers. A talented photographer named Johnny Miller photographed hostels for the Daily Maverick, a South African news publication. These Black migrant workers worked as miners who dug for gold and diamonds. Hostels were established to prevent these migrant workers from living in the cities where a majority of white people lived. Although apartheid is over, many hostels still exist around the country and are considered to be dangerous and a hotbed of violence and crime. According to the Netflix doc, the 5 suspects split up and drove in 2 cars from the hostel to Mzamo section, Vosloorus. 2 male witnesses who were sitting 3 houses away from the Khumalo house saw one of the cars parked near an electricity box. 3 of the identified suspects got out of that car. Later on, the same male witnesses saw the men running out of the Khumalo household. The person running in front had locks or dreadlocks, and carried a firearm as he ran. These witnesses described how the men looked to the police, and the police were able to compile sketches. Unfortunately, those two male witnesses mysteriously died or passed away. If this theory is true, it corroborates Tumelo's court testimony about the intruder who had locks. Accused number 3, or Carlos Mncube, is said to have had locks at the time of Senzo's murder, but he cut them off when he was arrested for another crime that he committed. After leaving the Khumalo house, the men then got into the 2 cars they had arrived in and drove back to the Vosluris hostel. Here is more evidence that ties these men to Senzo's murder. Carlos Mncube, who is accused number 3, was already in jail for murdering a taxi boss in Alexandra Township, and he used the same murder weapon to kill Senzo. A ballistics test proved this. On Mncube's phone was a photograph which he took that day, and he was wearing the same clothes as what the witnesses described him wearing. That would be the brownish or caramel jackets and the Scotch hats. Accused number 2, or Bongani Ntanzi, knocked off work earlier than usual and didn't go to work for a few days before the crime was committed. The police have a confession from Ntanzi, who said that it was a hit, and he implicated the others, which led to their arrest. There were a number of witnesses who saw these suspects on the day of the murder, and at least 3 of the 5 men who are professional hitmen have committed similar crimes. There is, however, some information that casts doubt on the guilt of these 5 suspects. Since the trial began in 2022, the 5 accused have denied their involvement in Senzo's murder. In the Netflix doc, 2 of the suspects stated that they were offered money by the police to say that they were involved. During the trial, advocate Malisela Tefo, who represented accused number 1 to number 4, stated on behalf of his clients that they were beaten, intimidated, and coerced into making their confessions. This tactic is reminiscent of tactics which the apartheid police would use to incriminate innocent individuals. The police haven't been able to establish the mastermind behind the hits, although there are some theories. The trial is expected to proceed in May 2023, and as previously stated, all 5 accused deny their involvement. Although one of them had allegedly said that he met with Kelly Khumalo, who planned the hit on Senzo. But he said this in 2020, and as of 2022, he denies his involvement entirely. It's also worth noting that the Meyiwa family is divided when it comes to Senzo's murder. Senzo Meyiwa, who is Senzo's elder brother, notably believes that the 5 accused men are innocent. This brings us to theory number 2. There is an elephant in the room which I haven't discussed, and that is the relationship between Senzo Meyiwa and Kelly Khumalo. I purposely didn't discuss the relationship at the beginning of the video because I didn't want to use it to frame this story. Kelly Khumalo is a South African singer, songwriter, actress, and dancer who was born on the 11th of November 1984. She has released 9 studio albums, and her latest album was certified gold. She has a biography called The Kelly Khumalo Story, which I'm really interested in reading, but I haven't been able to before the release of this video. Since I've known about this story, Kelly Khumalo has been blamed for the death of Senzo. I'm going to be that person and say that most of the coverage has been misogynistic towards Kelly. By no means will I defend her, because there is a lot that I disagree with regarding her actions. But I do want to say that if we're gonna blame someone for murder, let's do it based on facts and not on misogynistic feelings. There are those who believe in the intruder theory, but who blame Kelly for Senzo's death, because he was a married man. She has even been accused of using umuti or traditional medicine to make him fall in love with her. This is problematic because for years, women have been blamed for using black magic against men. Women have been associated with witchcraft for centuries in Western and African cultures, so it's no surprise that Kelly has been painted as an evil woman who went after an innocent, defenseless man. I'm not saying that she is innocent, but I believe that anti-woman language has been used to portray her, and this is not only harmful towards her, but women in the real world too. Since Kelly debuted as a singer, the media has portrayed her as a kind of Jezebel. This is a biblical term and is defined as a woman who is impudent, shameless, or morally unrestrained. I think most people see Kelly as this Jezebel because of the way she dresses and the way her relationship with Senzo was seen as cheating. It might also be because of her past relationships and her open struggle with drug addiction. Where Senzo has been framed as a wholesome hero, Kelly has been framed as the binary opposite, even though both of them were guilty of infidelity. I didn't mean to go on a feminist rant, but I think it's very important to remember that women often get blamed for things that men are equally guilty of. In this case, the cheating, which has often been used to frame this case. Now, let's get on to the facts regarding Kelly Khumalo and this case. In a television interview with SABC News, advocate Malisela Tefo presented shocking facts about the case. He said that in May or June 2020, the 6 people who were with Senzo the night he died were going to be arrested. Police Commissioner General Kehlas Tole intervened and stopped the planned arrest of those 6 people. Advocate Tefo also mentioned in the interview that Police Minister Bheki Cele told Senzo Meyiwa's mother that Kelly Khumalo was the mastermind behind Senzo's shooting. According to Advocate Tefo, there were more than 70 people involved in the investigation, and all of them were fired by Police Minister Bheki Cele. He said that in case docket number 375, there are 14 witnesses, but he didn't know the number of witnesses in case number 636. Remember, case number 636 is what the prosecution is basing their case on in the ongoing trial. It's the case with the 5 accused. Advocate Tefo also described a different version of events, which implicated the 6 people who were in the house. He said that 2 shots were fired that night. The first shot was fired by someone who arrived late. He shot at the ground because he wanted to know something, but he wasn't getting an answer. This is, presumably, Mthethwa. A scuffle ensued between Senzo and Mthethwa. The others who were in the house approached to assist, and the firearm ended up in the hands of Kelly Khumalo, who then shot Senzo, but not by accident. This is allegedly Mthethwa. A scuffle ensued between Senzo and Mthethwa. The others who were in the house approached to assist, and the firearm ended up in the hands of Kelly Khumalo, who then shot Senzo, but not by accident. Advocate Tefo confirmed that the murder weapon was brought by one of the 7 people who were in the house that night. Allegedly, it was Mthethwa, but in the Netflix documentary, his father, South African musician and producer Chico Twala, has denied this. This information implicates Kelly Khumalo in the murder of Senzo Meyiwa, but I'd like to emphasize that she is innocent until proven guilty, and no charges have been brought against her. The third theory sort of arose and gained prominence from a popular Twitter profile named Man's Not Barry Roo. This account is anonymous, and the Man's Not Barry Roo account tweeted that the person guilty of killing Senzo Meyiwa was Mthethwa. He alleged that in the Voslorus house that evening, Longwe and Zandi Khumalo got into a fight. things were pretty heated, and Senzo tried protecting Zandi from Longwe. Longwe then allegedly shot Senzo in retaliation. The Netflix documentary paints the picture that these tweets by Mans Not Barry Roo contribute to the long-standing public opinion that the murder was allegedly committed by Longwe Twala. Even though case docket number 375 implicates Longwe Twala and the rest of the people who were in the house the night Senzo Meyiwa died, Longwe hasn't been implicated and he is innocent until proven guilty. Let's get on to more of the trial and the other two witnesses who were cross-examined by the defense during the trial in 2022. I'm not an expert when it comes to the law, but I did watch the trial on YouTube, so I'm going to continue to present important facts. The first person to take the stand was Forensic Officer Thabo Johannes Mosia. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Advocates Tefo and Mshololo did a really good job of showing Mr. Mosia's incompetence. At certain points, I felt sorry for him with the way they were grilling him, but when he described his actions when he first arrived on the scene, I couldn't take him seriously as a forensics officer or investigator. The first sign of incompetence was Mr. Mosia's laxity when it came to getting to the scene of Senzo's murder. He seemingly took a long time to attend the scene. When he received the call about the murder, he first went to a police station in Vosloorus. Then he went to Botselong Hospital where Senzo was. Then he went to Ntombi Khumalo's house where the incident happened. So many things could have happened in that time, such as evidence tampering. Mosia said he arrived after 10 p.m. when the shooting allegedly happened before 9 p.m., which was according to Tumelo Madlala. By the time he arrived, there were other investigating officers on the scene, and instead of leading the forensic investigation himself, he took directions from a police officer, whose name is Brigadier Ndlovu, who doesn't specialize in forensics. Brigadier Ndlovu is the one who pointed out special points of interest to Mosia, but the defense lawyers argued that this was problematic. In fact, they asserted that Mosia was bullied by Brigadier Ndlovu into only choosing particular points of interest. The defense argued that the shooting of Senzo actually happened after 7 p.m. and that a neighbor heard a gunshot around this time. I know we're discussing Mosia, but I have to bring Tumelo back into the narrative because this means he's either lying when he says that the crime happened before 9 p.m. or he simply doesn't remember. It also makes the people who were with Senzo look suspicious because they removed Senzo from the scene and didn't call an ambulance or police immediately after the incident happened. For the defense, the removal of Senzo from the scene was proof of evidence tampering. In fact, they asserted that Senzo was already dead when he was being taken to hospital in his BMW X6 by Kelly Khumalo. The defense lawyers showed that Mosia didn't properly investigate the scene because he didn't collect all of the evidence. He even admitted on the stand that he didn't collect all of the evidence samples from the scene. This includes gunshot residue from the people who were with Senzo that night. In an article from the Daily Maverick, a forensic consultant named Kevin McDonald said, "If there is a shooting, then everybody should be treated as a suspect until they've been cleared." Well, clearly Ntombi Khumalo, Kelly Khumalo, Zandi Khumalo, Tumelo Madlala, Nthogo Twala, and Longwe Twala weren't treated as suspects by Mosia, who was the lead forensics investigator or officer. McDonald also said that their clothes should have been taken for blood spatter evidence, which is something that Mosia failed to do. To show further incompetence, Mosia then left to attend other crime scenes, and the defense wants to know who he left in charge. Mosia basically stuttered throughout his response, and I think this successfully contributed to the point made by the defense of evidence tampering, especially because when Mosia came back to the scene, there was a bullet casing found in the kitchen behind some glass jars. Advocate Mshololo, who represents accused number 5, wanted to know why or how Mosia missed that casing when he first attended the scene. She then asserted that the bullet casing was planted after Mosia left to attend other crime scenes. Mosia didn't take any samples from the kitchen door where the intruders allegedly entered. Remember, Tumelo testified that Senzo was shot in the kitchen. I think the defense is trying to prove that Senzo was not shot in the kitchen, but in the living room. That makes the bullet casing found in the kitchen more suspicious. Mosia allowed the people who were with Senzo to stay in the house during his investigation. According to forensic experts, this demonstrated incompetence because they should have been removed from the scene in order to preserve it as closely as possible. Mosia took 8 pictures of the crime scene, and the folder containing these pictures was taken by crime scene management without his knowledge. Defense lawyers stated that this was problematic because they could not show the originals in court, which could be a further indication of evidence tampering. As I mentioned before, there are 2 case dockets investigated by 2 different police teams on this single case. In 2019, Mosia was approached by the head of the other investigating police team to make a statement on the docket which implicated the 6 people who were with Senzo. In hindsight, Mosia said that he didn't know he was making a statement or deposition for this docket. At this point, he sounded really incompetent, because how did you not read the details to know which docket you were making a sworn statement on? There's a lot more on the cross-questioning of Thabo Mosia, but let's move on to the second witness, Sergeant Patrick Mthethwa. I'm not gonna lie, I was very distracted while watching Mthethwa on the stand, and there were moments when I couldn't hold in my laughter. His cross-examination was pretty entertaining to watch, and I don't know if that's appropriate for me to say. It was frustrating at times because he came across as a bit rude and disrespectful, but his cross-questioning also revealed some pretty interesting things. Sergeant Mthethwa was actually one of the first to arrive on the scene with a few other police officers. The defense demonstrated the incompetence of these officers and Sergeant Mthethwa because when they arrived, they had a conversation with a man named Themba, who had the keys to the house where Senzo died. The occupants of the house had left the keys in his possession when they took SenzoMeyiwa to hospital. And Themba told Sergeant Mthethwa that he didn't have much information on what had happened. Therefore, Sergeant Mthethwa and the other police officers didn't secure the scene. Sergeant Mthethwa said that they didn't register that the house was the scene of the crime, so they decided to go to the hospital. His admission played right into the hands of the defense because it further demonstrated their point about police incompetence and evidence tampering. During his testimony, Advocate Mshololo told Sergeant Mthethwa that there was evidence that when they left the scene to go to the hospital, the scene was cleaned. Advocate Mshololo presented this evidence in court from a statement written by a witness named Maggie Peary, who said, "The reason I went into the house is because I wanted to see what happened in the house. When we were in the house, I saw water on the floor, on the passage near the toilet door. I was amazed to see the water on the floor, where I was told somebody was shot in the house." Sergeant Mthethwa testified that when he went into the house, he didn't see a lot of blood, and it looked like the floor was wet, as if it had just been mopped. Mthethwa and the police officers heard from other witnesses that they saw 2 men running outside of the house and into a nearby park. Mthethwa and the other police officers proceeded to search the park, but didn't see anything. During his cross-examination, Mosia said that he met Brigadier Ndlovu at the scene, but Mthethwa contradicted that and said that Mosia was the first to attend the scene. Here are some other facts that were presented during the cross-examination of these three witnesses. Only one cell phone was reported to have been stolen by the intruders. The defense argued that after the murder, there was a meeting between senior management of police and the family, and there is eyewitness testimony for this, about how to conceal the murder of Senzo. This hints at police corruption and the potential fact that Kelly Khumalo and Longwe Twala, who are both celebrities, are well connected. A witness stated that when they entered the house, there was water on the floor, as if it had been cleaned. A woman's DNA was found on the hat that allegedly belonged to the intruder. Tumelo Madlala said that Senzo's blood wasn't flowing, but came out in scattered spots on the floor. 2 of the 5 accused say they were coerced into their confessions. The other 3 say that they know nothing about the case they're currently on trial for. This sums up the theories regarding Senzo's death. The trial resumes this May, and even though it's based on case docket number 375, it's been announced that when the trial concludes, the National Prosecuting Authority, or NPA, will make a decision on whether to prosecute the suspects in the second docket, case number 636. That could possibly mean a whole new trial with different suspects and witnesses. As Advocate Thabo said, 2 case dockets for 1 case is unprecedented. There was a lot to cover in this video, but I hope that it helped you to become more familiar with the case if you weren't before. This concludes the second episode of South African True Crime Stories. Thank you for listening.